Good evening, my Trues Clues aficionados. I hope you're staying safe out there, paying attention to life's trues, clues around you. I have a case I would like to discuss tonight that definitely should pull at your heartstrings and get you a little ticked off too at the same time about how the haves and the haves not, in other words, those who get justice and those who do not, can affect society on the whole. And the case I want to talk to tonight is Kendrick Johnson. On January 11th of 2013, the body of Kendrick Johnson was discovered inside a vertical rolled up mat in a gymnasium of Lowndes High School in Valdosta, Georgia, where he was a student. After a preliminary investigation and autopsy was concluded that Johnson's death was accidental. His family had a private pathologist conduct a second autopsy, which concluded he had died from blunt force trauma. On October 31st of 2013, the U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Georgia announced that his office would open a formal review into Johnson's death on 2016. The Department of Justice announced it would not be filing any criminal charges related to Johnson's death, which is shocking to a lot of people, me included, and completely enraging the parents. Because they said that he had fallen into the mat after playing around on the top of them or whatever, decided to crawl in to get his shoes that was on the bottom of the mat. And the mat was just slight of 6 feet tall, or about 6 feet tall when it's rolled up. It doesn't even make common sense that you're going to try to go into the mat to get your shoes. Why you wouldn't just pick up the mat or roll it to the side to get your shoes out. And according to a number of kids that go there and do that exact same thing, people are not climbing into the mats. You couldn't even get into the mats because they're rolled up so tightly. So that leaves question to be concerned there for the parents and for people who have looked at the case. When I first heard about it back in 2013, I thought, that is weird as heck. Doesn't make any sense to me why that would happen. I mean, you heard of situational asphyxia before, at least I have, but the situation just seemed really out of proportion. There is a maze of information on this case and answers have not been forthcoming, and a number of years have passed and yet no real answers in what has happened to this young man. For his family and his soul to be able to rest at peace, there isn't peace to be found because the answers the family is looking for have not been provided. And at this point in time, I'm not sure that it can be, because I think a lot of evidence is missing, destroyed on purpose, or destroyed, but it's gone. Unless somebody out there will speak up to what's happened, there's probably not a lot that could be said to resolve this issue right now. And I feel bad for the family, but I tell you, something tells me something will come forward and help them. It's kind of like a cold case where everybody knows the perpetrator and yet nothing is coming forth because of fear on so many levels. Like Georgia native Timothy Coggins was found brutally murdered in October 1983. By the time the perpetrator was identified, they had already lived a full life. And DNA testing, old cold cases are being solved. By the time they get solved, however, the perpetrators are already old or dead. I did Colorful Colorado case. 2 or 3 of the cold cases that were solved or about to be solved, one, they weren't even sure the perpetrators were around anymore, and one for sure was dead. So these people murder and still go on to have a fairly decent life, which is really alarming. I'm not sure what that says about us, but we are catching up with that with DNA and all of that. So be careful out there when you're taking that family tree stuff. Praying that Kendrick's family does not have to suffer much longer waiting to get the answers as to what happened to their loved one. And the answers are very slow in coming to bring them justice for Kendrick's murder. And they have raised Cain. They sit out there day after day outside of the courthouse. Wind, rain, snow, shine. Everybody's out there, family members. They have been arrested for blocking the doors of the courthouse, trying to keep Kendrick's image alive in the public's eyes, so that people don't forget and they can get these answers with public pressure. And that's another reason to do this podcast, is to advise people this is still an ongoing fight for the family. There are two schools of thought what happened here. I guess it depends on what side of the city you come from and what side you believe happened as far as culturally as well. On January 11, 2013, the body of Kendrick Johnson was discovered in a gymnasium. Authorities hypothesized that he had fallen into the mat while looking for his shoes and died after being unable to get out. 3 students at Lowndes High School told investigators that it was common for some students to store their shoes behind or under rolled up gym mats. Johnson was not wearing shoes when he was found. A student at the school said he had shared a pair of Adidas shoes with Johnson, and that after gym class, Johnson would always, sorry about that, I guess we just had a semi going out. A student at the school said he had shared a pair of Adidas shoes with Johnson, and after gym class, Johnson would always go to the mats, jump up, and toss the shoes inside of the middle of the hole of the mat. That's fine. As I said, a lot of people did that. One of his friends even attested. Either they threw him behind the mats or they threw him underneath that. But nobody was climbing inside of the mat to get the shoes. They tipped the mat to the side and grabbed them. Lieutenant Stride Jones, who headed up the investigation for Lowndes County Sheriff's Office, stated, "We never had credible information that indicated this was anything other than an accident." Johnson's family questioned this hypothesis, and satisfied with the results of the investigation, they hired an independent autopsy conducted by William R. Anderson with Forensic Dimensions in Heathrow, Florida. On June 15, 2013, Anderson claimed that his findings indicated traces of blunt force trauma to the right neck and soft tissues, and suggested the death was not accidental. And again, that's 2 schools of thought. The people who think that it was an accident, and the people who think that it was definitely not an accident, that something really bad happened to their beloved young and vibrant son. The families had a lot of people, and a lot of people think, after the opinion of the private pathologist was released, Johnson's family stated they believed Johnson had been murdered. The family retained the services of attorney Benjamin Crump. On October 13, 2013, U.S. Attorney Michael J. Moore announced that his office would open a formal review into Johnson's death. Crump's application to practice law in Georgia representing Johnson's parents was not ruled on, and he withdrew from representing the family as no longer a participant in the case. Johnson's family filed a legal action to open a coroner's inquest into his death. When the judge in that case delayed a decision pending the outcome of the U.S. Attorney's review, the family demanded the governor of Georgia immediately authorize the inquiry instead. The family, together with the NAACP and other civil rights activists, then held a rally at the Georgia State Capitol in Atlanta. The governor's office released a statement indicating that they would await the report of the U.S. Attorney. The independent autopsy found that sometime after Johnson's body was recovered from the mat and had passed through the funeral home, It had been stuffed with newspapers. The funeral home had processed the body following the GBI's autopsy, stated they never received Johnson's internal organs from the coroner. The organs were said to have been destroyed through natural process and discarded by the prosecutor before the body was sent back to Valdosta. According to the funeral home owner, that left a void which the funeral home filled. The funeral home owner stated that it is standard practice to fill a void in this fashion, and that cotton or sawdust may also be employed for this purpose. Johnson's family filed a complaint with the regulatory body against the funeral home operator. It is not normal to have the damn organs missing from a young man's body. When the autopsy is done, you look at the organs, you document what you see there, you weigh it, you put it in a bag, you put it back in the body. There's no reason for organs to be missing other than the whole reason that an autopsy is done, to find definitive reasons of the death of a person that you're doing the autopsy on. Organs, everything internal, provides a great story of what happened to you in your final hours of prior to your death, as well as the way you lived your life. That whole thing is just alarm raising all the way around. Plus the fact that his clothes were missing. They talk about his shoes being missing. Well, you could tell that his body was positioned after it was found in the mat. You can just look at the autopsy photos and see that his legs are in such an unnatural position for somebody who would have been fighting to get out of a mat if they were stuck, or crawling into a mat. And where the hell did the shoes come from that are on top of his legs? And then there's blood underneath then on the mat. And you can tell from looking at his body, something very suspicious and sinister happened to this young man. So, what is up with that? Valdosta, Georgia. A subsequent investigation by Georgia's Secretary of State's office found that a subsequent investigation by the Georgia State of One more time. A subsequent investigation by the Georgia Secretary of State's office found that the funeral home did not follow best practice, and other material was not more acceptable than newspaper. They shouldn't have been doing it. Nonetheless, whatever. Nonetheless, investigation cleared the funeral home of any wrongdoing. Of course, a spokesperson for the Secretary of State said that the investigation found the funeral home didn't violate any rules. You don't even tell the family that the poor baby came without his organs. The Johnson family subsequently filed a civil lawsuit against the funeral home seeking monetary damages. The Johnson family requested that his body be exhumed for a second time and was granted permission by Valdosta city officials on June 22, 2018. Johnson's body was exhumed again. There was no doubt that something weird had been going on here with this whole situation, and still no answers. And the poor baby can't get any rest because they keep having to pull him up out of the ground. Oh my goodness. So anyway, that takes us to the fact that, you know, there was a lot of questions when this went on. There seemed to be a lot of questions while it was going on. Every time that an autopsy was done, other than the first one, it confirmed that something traumatic had happened to this young man. And to the crime scene photos, when the parents looked at them, they felt like certain parts of it had been staged. So they definitely were wondering why they weren't getting the support they needed in getting this crime solved. However, soon after Jason Pollard heard about what was going on, and did CNN got into it as well, there was CCTV cameras that seemed to not match up completely. And there was a certain amount of suspicion around this scenario going with these CCTV cameras that picked up Kendrick going into the gym, picked him up in the morning, walking along, having a little yellow folder in his hand and having white shoes on. And then he kind of looks like he runs into the gym and he running across the gym. And then he kind of just disappears and you never see him again. And that whole scenario is just really weird. And so as soon as you see the pictures and realize there's something missing there, a forensic analyst enlisted by CNN found the tapes had 2 cameras in missing an hour and 5 minutes of footage, while another one was missing 2 hours and 10 minutes of footage. And of course, this is the most critical time and the most needed time of the footage. And it's the only thing that's missing out of the whole freaking day is the critical part that would answer the questions of what happened to Kendrick Johnson, and isn't convenient. That's the only thing that's missing from there. Some of the apparent lapses in coverage were found to result from camera systems that were not synchronized with one another. Timestamps between some separate camera systems differed by as much as 20 minutes for the same time period, giving the impression of a gap for a portion of the footage where no gap existed. Are you sure? Are you real sure? Other missing footage was the result of the camera's motion activated function not being triggered. Camera systems were motion activated using a charge in light pixels to turn recordings off and on. The area where Johnson's body was discovered, where the gym mats were stored, was outside the range of all the surveillance cameras. Very freaking convenient. True Crime has seen some autopsy photos and oh my goodness. And these ones were startling. Even for a person that's seen a number of different scenarios in autopsy. Photos for somebody that was just wrapped up in a mat. And you're like, okay, well, maybe it'll be a little blood settling or whatever. But when you really take a look at his face, there's definitely something beyond that going on here. And the concerns and the unjustified answers and questions that have been put forth to the state police department and what has happened in the ensuing investigation is startling. I mean, in high places, people lose their job that had professed to defend the Kendrick Johnson murder, I was going to say Johnson family, then go over to the other side, quit what they're doing, just take a better, well-paying job. I mean, like really well-paying job. And then there's nobody to pick up the slack and end up following the case through as far as persecution. And things are left falling apart there. It's just kind of weird. I mean, everything seems to be working in a time manner that gangs up on the Johnsons. And in a place with the history like Georgia, and I guess Valdosta on top of it, it's not entirely surprising how things are going down here. The case has been opened and closed. The body's been autopsied numerous times. This poor family. And then you have to have the situation where it's compared to a historical lynching in the southern area and people who have gotten away with real true crimes and murder, actual hurting people, taking it beyond hurting people, not feeling any remorse for their actions, maybe even feeling vindicated for their actions for this type of situation. And that's how it rolls in these, scenarios. You're supposed to stay with who you stay with. Don't bother. Mind your business. Do what you're told, type of thing. It's completely wrong. If there's something going on here, then it should be having documentation and evidential documentation to support what's going on here, so that people who have committed the crime are definitely going to pay for it. Right. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. I mean, there's already so many missing pieces on tape, missing pieces of organs on the body. His clothing are missing. I mean, what else can you do to make this case possibly not work? Getting only mostly silence in response is something that is known to certain cultural groups throughout history. That happened time and time before, and the reasons it happens has not usually been good ones. When you find a questionable death that is horrific to a certain culture of a lower income people, so if you look at both sides of the situation and you think, listen to this documentary and they're like, yeah, this kid, we don't know what happened. And then later they're like, oh yeah, we know what happened. It was the kid. And this was a horrible, terrible accident. No one can be held at fault for it though. But when you look at it deeper, and even the FBI has admitted that it was a homicide. However, there's not enough evidence to pursue a perpetrator. His shoe was planted there, and they, agreed to the family that that did happen. But they also said they don't not going to pursue it anymore either. Could it be that they can't pursue it anymore? Not that they don't want to, but they can't because the evidence was completely ruined and destroyed, and they don't even know how to get back to finding what the truth could be. It's a historical thing. It's happened before with law enforcement, and lets you know, even in your own home state, like John Bonet, I mean, that was handled horrifically bad. And apparently cops in some places need a handbook on how to break down a serious crime. I know Boulder wasn't used to it, but they had enough money and resources not to be screwing around. And this situation too, these people deserve to have the truth. You can always feel it in your gut when something is wrong. So there's got to be some way to police the police, or not police them, but make sure they're, doing the crime scene correctly. Because part of that, is if it doesn't start out correctly, it's not going to end out correctly. People say, crazy stuff about, wanting to cut back on budgets or whatever, but these people deserve answers. It's hard to believe that what happened to this kid, as innocent as that, especially when you see the diameter of what those rolled up mats look like. And it's crazy. Society is crazy, and it's crazy to think that, if somebody's in a position or has enough money that they can manipulate and do whatever they want to people and get away with it. If there's truth to be found, there's truth that needs to be set forth. The family is far from giving up and needs to demand answers on a regular basis, and they plan on it to make sure that they get answers for what happened to their loved one. And we as the people need to be holding our government on down to more accountable and responsible ways that they handle things that go wrong. You can't just be busting up into houses and shooting up people. You can't act like you don't work for us. We want to be safe, and we understand there's a certain amount of force in what's gone on or what will go on. At the same time, there needs to be forethought in how to handle different situations. You can't just run amok killing society, run amok handling investigations as you want to, and then claiming everything is perfect afterwards, judging people who are guilty when they're innocent, people on death row who don't deserve to die. Government just refuses to acknowledge when they make mistakes. A lot of people are working on this for them, and I hope that it doesn't turn into anarchy or whatever. But this poor man, the poor future of our United States, if we cannot learn how to grow together. According to the autopsy I heard the guy do, and he is standing on his credentials, which are very esteemed. He is saying that there was blunt force trauma in such a way to the neck that this could have caused somebody to die immediately, including this young man. It could have resulted in a very quick death if the hit was right. And teenagers make bad choices all the time, but entitled teenagers can make extremely bad choices if given a chance. And if they know nothing's going to happen to them because they can demand the support and the cover up of certain officials and certain friends, quote unquote, if they do something bad, they may not even have to worry about paying for it. And the truth will be covered to us as a people and to them as a family. The truth needs to come forth and it needs to be spoken. All I can do is pray that the truth comes out for this young man and his family. He had a bright future, and this was just some maybe teen cajoling that got out of crap. Maybe this was just some teen cajoling that got out of hand, and maybe it involved a female that helped create the situation for an innocent family and an innocent young man. And maybe because he looked at the wrong girl, or maybe because he touched the wrong girl. Boy, doesn't that sound familiar? Some things just never change. And many people feel entitled to act and do as they please, no matter how it affects other people, and feel no remorse for it. And you just feel like this resounds in that type of situation. It would be a very high sense of entitlement that this person would have in thinking that they could commit this crime and just go on and have a very esteemed career and a very esteemed life, maybe playing sports. If you are a true crime aficionado, please definitely check out the documentary, because it does put you in a different form of thought compared to what you've heard in other scenarios, like what the public media is putting out. You hear it coming straight from the family. I think Jason Polar did an excellent documentary on that information and took the time to do a really deep delve. It took 4 years to make the documentary. My hopes and prayers go out to the Johnson family, and I hope that you get the answers that you're looking for, the justice that you're looking for. My prayers are with you. Be safe.